2 weeks on from the disputed election in Belarus, and still hundreds of thousands are out on the streets protesting. President Alexander Lukashenko arrested or threatened the male opposition leaders, so women have stepped in to take charge in both leadership roles and also in demonstrations. Well, let's take a look at the role of women opposing the president. Dr. Dyan Mazurana is a professor at Tufts University and an advisor to several governments and UN agencies on how women are affected by armed conflict. She joins me now from Boston in the United States. Dr. Mazurana, what do women bring to protests that men don't bring?
Thank you for having me. It's the right question to ask. One of the things that women are bringing to this protest is the traditional femininity of Belarus, which means that attacking them as they show up in white, a sign of peace, that they are barefoot, that they are bearing flowers, could really possibly cause a big backfire against this authoritarian regime. With men, there's more likelihood to claim that they're provoking, as we see with the likely false claims of a man, going to throw a bomb. With women, barefoot, in white, coming out with their sisters, their dogs, this is a really hard claim to make. And with a repressive regime like this, which is very patriarchal because authoritarianism is entwined with patriarchy, that regime needs women to behave in a certain way, and they're not behaving in that way.
Where else in the world have female-led protests been effective?
Well, I think the most well-known example is the mothers and the grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo in Argentina. And again, we saw a very violent regime doing things similar to the Lukashenko regime, disappearing protesters, killing people, police brutality, torture in detention centers, so that the men really were not safe to come out and protest. They were very targeted. So who was left? Women. Women came out to protest. And similar to what they're doing in Belarus, they said, we're out here as mothers. We're out here as wives. And we're told in our rhetoric, our national rhetoric, that this is our role. Well, a good mother goes to look for her son. A good mother wants to know that the country's going to be safe for her children. And so it's very hard for this kind of authoritarian, patriarchal regime to now attack these women who are playing the role that regime wants them to play, although now they're in the streets demanding change.
You talk about traditional femininity, but not all women in public life in history have been like that. I can think of Indira Gandhi and Margaret Thatcher, who were both unafraid to take tough measures which were criticized by many, many people in their countries.
Yes, and absolutely. The political women and activists in Belarus are also very strong women who are out in public risking their lives. Risking the lives of their loved ones in detention for political action. I'm not saying that these women are, what I'm saying is that the authoritarian regime needs them to behave in a certain way. And just as the president said, go home and keep cooking and raise your children. And they're going to use that same portrayal of women to protect themselves. They're going to say, well, we have to come out on the streets. Where are our husbands? What's happening with our children? Is this a future we want? And they're doing it in a very peaceful way, which is very risky for the regime to act violently against them. To act violent against barefoot women with their dogs dressed in white handing flowers, that could really what that could do is cause what analysts call backfire, which is that the police refuse to attack these women. Now we've seen within the last few hours threats to bring out the army. Let's see what's going to happen if the army is asked to move against unarmed women of Belarus, their sisters, their mothers, their lovers, their aunts, their grandmothers. What will happen? So we've seen in other regimes that can really backfire on them. Sudan is a great example with the uprisings in 2018, 2019.
Right.
Again, really strong women leadership there. And when the regime moved violently, raping some of those women protesters, you saw massive turnouts for protests. And it was actually just a few weeks and the regime